Thank you, and I wish the council elected officials were here to listen to that. I hear so much about, well, they don't look sick, and so everyone's just there to get high. And yet, in my own experience with my brother-in-law, my sister drove from Salt Lake City to San Bernardino to get medication to help with his pain. And she did research, she cashed in her retirement just to get a little oil to put on a piece of paper that he could dissolve under his tongue to have 2 hours pain-free so he could breathe and eat and sleep without pain. And so they just don't get it. And so to have the doctor talk a little bit about that, I think is important. Unless you've gone through it, it really is not about, it's not the same thing. It's not the same customer base, and it's not even the same product at some times. So thank you. And I know that we have a taxation measure on the ballot as well, but quite frankly, I think it's a crime to tax medical marijuana, but that's my personal opinion, and I'm going to vote my opinion. That's all I got to say.
If I can chime in on the medical benefit and tax for a second. Some of the people I know that have tried traditional medicine, traditional prescription stuff, they're okay with that because their insurance covers it. So when that doesn't work and they become desperate and they look for alternative treatment modalities, they come to cannabis. Well, the sad part is that health insurance doesn't cover cannabis. So the more you tax them, the more money comes out of their pocket. And they feel really hurt by that.
Thank you. So we have about 4 or 5 more questions. Quickly, we'll go through them. And then if you have a question that you would like us to ask the panel, please, Malahat will be circulating. You can raise your hand. She'll pass out the cards and you can write them down. But, there's a lot of negativism coming out there that we hear, not only from the council, but people in the community. And for instance, there was a motion by a couple of council people to not have them near nurseries or childcare because a 3-year-old is going to buy marijuana. I'm not sure. But there were instances where they were really concerned, and rightfully so, about having kids or young people, high school or whatever, to get their hands on marijuana from the dispensaries. So will kids, if MM is passed, will it make it easier for kids to be able to get marijuana from these dispensaries?
Go ahead. I was going back to the parents.
And it's okay, Adam, if you end up answering, because that's your job, right?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is it requires a doctor's recommendation, and almost all regulated dispensaries, which would be regulated under this measure, have very, very stringent procedures on how you confirm that there's a physician regulation. And I guess if you do have a child with seizure disorder that has been given a prescription, there are even regulations with regard to that, on how that's done. But no, it should not make it any easier for anybody to do that, because in order for someone to go and, let's say you're going to worry about somebody getting it and then supplying it to children, well, they have to first go out and get a prescription and be seen by a doctor, and then the amount that they can purchase is actually limited. Okay, so the regulations of medicinal marijuana in itself make it very cumbersome to have that kind of situation occur.
Anyone else?
Yeah. The other aspect of it is that you already stated, it's 18, 21 here, and things like that. I can go down the street here, and I go purchase a dime bag. Kids that are teenagers, from 10 years old, all the way up, can do the exact same thing. So I would tell you that it's more accessible on the black market for kids, teenagers, underage, to go get it from somebody they don't know who they're buying it from somebody that probably has a shady past and is going to put them in harm's way. So you throw that up as a fear complaint to try to get everybody excited. I know they talk about also edibles or MIPS, with brownies, cookies, gummy bears, all sorts of new ways they're coming up to do this. Well, that's all regulated. And if you're a parent that has marijuana in the house and you're using it for medicinal purposes or you're using it for recreational purposes, at some point in time, you have to be responsible as the parent and an adult to put the stuff up. You can use liquor as an example. Plenty of kids that go buy liquor, somebody buying liquor and things like that from a store. It happens all around here. It just is what it is. They go and steal a theft from their parents' liquor cabinet. Okay, what's to stop the kids from doing that at home? You just need to be responsible as a parent, and I know 80%, 90% of the people are in the real world here are responsible as parents, but there are a few that need the regulations or governing body that need a little help. And I don't mean to be mean or anything like that, but that's just the reality of life. So those things come back to the parent of being a responsible adult and a responsible parent to your kids.
So the way we view this is that, look, we represent grocery store workers. Are kids getting a hold of alcohol in your community? Yes, just like they did when I lived here in this community. But the reality is when you take that and put it in a controlled, tax and regulated storefront market, ABC goes in there, or if somebody gets caught for selling alcohol, the ticket gets issued to the clerk, not to the business. The clerk or the worker is accountable for the transaction. The reason why you don't have self-checkouts in your community anymore that are selling alcohol is because the kids gain the checkouts. Those self-checkouts, they work perfectly fine, they lock up when you scan alcohol. But if you scan a 6-pack of Pepsi through them and put a 6-pack of beer in the bag, you've gamed the system. So by putting
That's how you do it.
so by putting it's the same little think about tobacco. In your community in tobacco, there are no more vending tobacco machines. There's a chain of custody where a worker has to hand somebody the tobacco, and it's that worker's responsibility to check their ID. And if tobacco gets into somebody, or alcohol gets into somebody's hands who's inebriated, we'll probably get into that sooner or later, or who is not supposed to have that for some reason, you can hold somebody accountable with checks and balances within your community. Look, we don't like it because we got sting people, and you know what? ABC goes after unionized grocery stores all the time. And our members get popped all the time for doing things they shouldn't be doing. They're just part of the community. But we're going to be better off as a community if we put these mechanisms in place, opposed to letting somebody out on the corner sell a product.
I'll just say a couple of quick words in regards to that. As of course, there's strict age requirements for anybody to be able to enter a dispensary, but it's really important as well in this measure. There's labeling requirements that will come into place as well. So that way, if a cannabis canister is given to an adult, and then the next thing he takes it out and puts it in a bag and gives it to a kid, I mean, as you said, we have to have responsible adults as well, but if we are able, through evidence, and to know that an adult was the diversion and gave it to a kid, as an association, the Long Beach Collective Association, hopefully consisting of all the legal operators in the city, we don't want that adult to come back to the facility because we know they're scheming the system. So we were able to put a ban or prohibit that person individually coming in because we know he's going around and selling it to kids, which is another assistance, another checks and balance on top of law enforcement or other agencies or whatever city officials that can work on that.
Okay, anyone else? I have the next question. As a council person, we get calls for everything. I mean, it could be a dog, it could be a recreational vehicle parked the wrong place, it could be whatever, but a lot of calls do come and did come from because they had concerns about dispensaries. Maybe valid, maybe invalid, I don't know. But I do have the question, a lot of people do have concerns about marijuana businesses in their neighborhoods, so what does MM do to prevent that issue? And if they do have a concern or an issue with a dispensary, what can they do? So will they be in neighborhoods, if they have a problem with dispensary?
Cool. So, number one, in regards to neighborhoods, in this ordinance, it is prohibited and it's it's exclusively prohibited for a dispensary or any licensed cannabis facility to be located in an exclusively residential zone. What the triggers that came into place over here is sensitive uses. So again, we need to have buffers from high schools, middle schools, kindergartens, elementary schools, also parks, beaches, libraries. So, you know, in these communities where you have libraries and parks and heavy residential areas, there is distances far greater than the state. Actually, the state does not have anything in regards to parks, beaches, or libraries. They have 0 distances, and we've provided that in this ordinance as well over here. So that's some of the ways that we're going to be able as well. Again, you know, we're taking like the blight issues, like the green crosses, out of the dispensary, so that way we don't have any loitering or people hanging around. And I believe, what's the next, the second question?
If they have an issue, what can they do?
Okay, so each and every single dispensary and any licensed facility within the city of Long Beach will have to have a liaison. This liaison will have to post a number within the facility, 1. 2, there's going to have to give it to the city manager's office. So that way, and they have 3 business days to be able to respond back to any complaint or citizen complaint that comes up, or it could be potentially a violation. So we have a community liaison that will be dealing with things directly in regards to their licensed facility around the clock. And then lastly, this ordinance asks for a medical cannabis task force, and it'll consist of people from the community, patients, people from the industry, labor, and as well, this task force will be meeting and talking about the issues. Again, one of the main issues that we had before is there was no bridge between the industry and anybody else. So whatever issues were coming up, we were not be able to hear it, understand it, analyze it, see how we can fix it. So there is a medical marijuana task force in this ordinance that can help alleviate some of those issues.
And along with that task force is also the community itself. I know in Long Beach we've talked about community-oriented policing forever, and that's a big part of it. So with us looking, depending upon population, with us looking at between 27 and 32 authorized collectives, I mean, everybody, the police department, the people in the community, and the various security entities that are going to be working this should know where every single one of those are, and it should make it abundantly clear of which ones are black market operations. See, in the past, that wasn't part of the deal. The citizens couldn't tell who was real, who was authorized, and who wasn't. This should be a no-brainer, and it's not like there's so many of them that we can't keep track of them. And with that liaison, I'm certain that liaison will also have a liaison with the police department. So, you know, that goes along the community policing ideology, and that's the best way to handle stuff is through communication. And there's certainly a way to report things anonymously. You know, all you have to do is call somebody and go, hey, I think this is going on at 123 Pine, and we can go and check that out. The police department has the ability to do that, so.
And they, I'm sure they will, we have a competent police department. So when you talked about the numbers, exactly how many dispensaries are allowed under MM, how many will be open, and along with that, how much money will be generated for the city of Long Beach? You talked a little bit about economics in the past, but if you can let us know the numbers, how do they compare to what we had in the past in terms of number of dispensaries, and what does MM do? What does it limit us to?
So in Measure MM, in regards to how many dispensaries we can have in the city, it limits it by population. We think that this is something that should be tied to population. The more population, the potential need for cannabis. So at its initial starting point, it will be 1 dispensary for every 18,000 residents in the city, which will approximately bring us about 26, maybe almost 27. And only by the vote of city council that they can increase it to 1 dispensary every 15,000 residents, which will be approximately 32 dispensaries. So we have a limit between 26 with a maximum of up to 32, 33 with the vote of city council increasing them. That's the only body that can actually increase the amount of collectives. In regards to tax,
But the amount of collectives are still occupied by the barriers.
of course. And these, and you know, you're talking about in regards to the zoning and the buffer zones. I mean, of course, these, and when we say up to 26, people will think that we're going to automatically get 26. That's not necessarily true, because these buffer zones are very strict buffer zones. We have 1,000 feet from schools, elementary, kindergartens, and middle schools. We have 600 feet from parks and beaches, and then 600 feet from parks and libraries. It is not that easy to be able to find real estate. So it is up to 26 at that. In regards to the taxation, you know, there's been a lot of you know, stipulation in regards to how, what's this going to generate. The city has had a report that it says it's going to cost the city $12 million to be able to regulate. But then at the same time, it does say on the bottom, hey, we're not really sure about these numbers. This is just an estimation. We're not exactly sure if that's going to be the case. We, behind the measure, you know, we feel that this is comfortably that it could be anywhere from $8 to $10 million, if not more. And because recreational was never been allowed, and we'll see if it will be allowed in the state of California this November, that could obviously just increase that much more, because we don't know what the recreational markets will look like. But you know, in regards to, you know, generating taxes, I've never heard of a city that's regulated and taxed medical cannabis where they came back and said, oh, I'm sorry, we're not making enough tax dollars in regards to enforcement. It's actually quite the opposite. Right now in Colorado, they're thinking about lowering the tax rates because they do see what kind of burden potentially can happen in regards to raising the prices. Because the bottom line, you know, when this was passed in 1996, it was about affordable and quality medication. And yes, 9 out of 10 patients or individuals would rather go into a place that is tested, has security, clean environment, friendly environment. But if you go in and if something that would usually cost you $50 now costs you $75, as much as you would love to enjoy those privileges, it's all about, you know, you have people have bills, people have rent, people are disabled, people have a hard time getting, this is their medicine, their livelihood. So we do want to be able to keep this as, you know, low as possible and not, you know, overtax it. But I think it's about 8 to 10 million once it's fully regulated.
Thank you, and I know 26 to some people sounds like a lot, but if you consider what we had in the past, when it was the Wild Wild West, we had over, what, 80 to 100, if not more.
Correct.
So it's a considerable decrease in numbers, and you know, it is about also demand, and when we have a patient demand that we need to fill, that's important. One last question, and then we're gonna go, we have a lot of questions from the audience, yes?
Yeah, I got a question.
Oh, well, you have to, she'll be right there. Let me ask the one last question, and then we can jump on it right now. What's the difference in products available at dispensary versus a drug dealer? And the last question is, isn't all this medicine just about getting high?
So I can absolutely tell you that anybody who's at all aware of the scientific basis of cannabis research and the scientific basis of what's going on and the products and how it's used in medicine, if you have any knowledge at all, I was very surprised when I spoke to the city council, how one of the councilmen said, well, we have tons of other medicine around for pain. Pain is just one of the many, many, many things that cannabis is used for. And as was mentioned before, we have people with post-traumatic stress disorder that would be committing suicide, and it turns out that it's a non-psychoactive component of cannabis that is the best for fighting with suicide. So we have people that are, the only way they're coping with life is due to the compounds in cannabis that are not the psychoactive components. The anti-seizure components, the majority of that is not psychoactive. So once again, anybody who's talking about this, who says, isn't this just a way that people get high and call it medicine, they're extremely ignorant on what's been going on, the research that's been done. Just one last note, in Israel, they're using it for head injuries. That's where a lot of the research has come through. I firmly believe that there will be a component of cannabis in every ambulance that will be used for any stroke or head injury patient, because there's a non-psychoactive component of cannabis, which, by the way, the U.S. government has patented. Okay, but there is a non-psychoactive component of cannabis that will limit neurological damage if ingested immediately after a neurological injury. That component, which is patented by the US government, is non-psychoactive. So, which means it does not get you high in layman's terms. So basically, again, it is nothing but sheer ignorance of what's going on in the world, what's going on in cannabis medicine over more than 10, 15 years. Okay, it would be sheer ignorance to think that these products are just products that get you high.
Thank you, doctor. Does anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, in regards to between the dealer and a dispensary, there's a testing process where each plant or batch of buds that will go through that will tell you what the THC content, what the pesticide contents are, everything in that you're actually physically buying. I've seen enough, we've bought enough, I've seen enough bunk stuff out on the streets where people are trying to sell it, selling just some oregano or something like that to somebody who doesn't know what they're buying, and that, so you don't know. Here you're exactly going to know what you're getting. You're going to know what the content is, what the CBDs are, if it's got pesticides, if it's organic. Currently in Colorado, every batch or grow that is done, sample has to go to a state-run testing laboratory facility. The state gets a printout of exactly what it is. All your products are labeled with that code serial number of that, and your grow and dispensaries will have the same printout of what it is to know exactly what you're getting. And that's also part of here within your MM, it states that this will be tested, so you know specifically what you're getting, not something off the street that you have absolutely no idea what it's laced with anything else. You're just taking yourself at risk.
To go on top of that point, many of the patients that use this are immunocompromised, either with cancer or AIDS or something else, and exposure to mold or fungus or something that's available on the street could actually be deleterious and maybe even fatal.
I know it's really important too is you will have, as long as the lab testing as well, but you'll have trained staff that will be able to help you recommend what kind of meds are going to be the best meds potentially for your situation. Because a lot of people come in, well, is indica the best? Is this a sativa? It's a hybrid. Well, I'm having this issue. And then we'll have people that will be able to be trained enough to at least be able to assist you with finding the product. As well, security. Security is a really important element. We've had, I can't even tell you the stories that we've had, the horror stories from disabled people, whether in a wheelchair or what other ailments, that they try to get product from a corner or from somewhere, and then at the end of the day, they just pretty much get jacked. Somebody would rob them. They would go in, they would take their medicine, and even though they had an ailment, and they would just take it, and they would take their money and just leave, pretty much. So that was a big issue for a lot of patients, is the safe access. And then just lastly, you'll have somebody that's responsible for the community. Someone that if you're a brick and mortar and you're sitting there and you're in a community, you're going to be there day in and day out. You want to make sure you're a good neighbor. You want to make sure that you're being proactive with whatever issues come up at the time.
Thank you. Big hand for our panel, and then we'll go to the audience questions. I just want to remind everyone that it is on your ballot. It's measure MM, and that's, you could remember medical marijuana, or you could remember M&Ms, whatever you want, but MM, and I think it's important because there's going to be a lot of noise around some of the around the marijuana issues, whether it's a tax issue or the state issue, but right here, what we're talking about is measure MM.
Can we give Tony a round of applause? In an effort to be as transparent as possible, I'm going to read the questions exactly as they're written. Some of them are worth answering, one of them may not be, but I'm going to go ahead and read them, and we'll go from there. This is for Adam. What is the difference in the taxes between MM and MA, and what should I vote for? Not me, but you know. I know what I'm voting for.
So the taxes in MM, we have a 6% on gross receipts tax for all dispensaries, and we have a $10 per square foot on cultivation, period, end. That's all it is. It's on a cultivation tax and the gross receipts. On Measure MA, you have a 8 to 12% range on so there's two parts of MA. You have the medicinal and the recreational tax. For the medicinal tax, you have a range from 6 to 8% on gross receipts and you have from $10 to $12 a square foot on the cultivation. On recreational, you have from 8 to 12% for gross receipts, and then you have $15 a square foot on cultivation, and then you also have an additional 6 to 8% on all other licenses, which is manufacturing, lab testing, transportation, which, that's what it is. I'll be voting for MM, I'll just put it like that.
This is for anyone on the panel who wants to answer it. What about a delivery service for people who could not leave their residence due to their illness? How about at least a limited service?
I'm sure that there's some people like, just really quick in regards to this ordinance right here, and state law state, you're allowed to have a delivery that is attached with a brick and mortar. That is what it is right now at the state level. Of course, there's a lot of state level language and regulations are still coming down. But this ordinance does permit for deliveries, but they have to be attached to a brick and mortar, and those deliveries can service the severely ill or the people that are immobile and don't have access to be able to, move around or transportation.
Also, the state Department of Health does allow a designee. You can officially designate someone as a surrogate to pick up your supplies, and that's part of state law. It started the public health department in the state.
What are the credentials of those who would regulate the industry? So who's regulating the industry?
What's the question?
What are the credentials of those who would regulate the industry?
Are they biochemists? Are they physicians? That's what I'm talking about.
Well, we can go by the state requirements, and what the state tells you is not necessarily who can be the regulators and working in these, but it tells you who cannot be. And, some individuals, for example, any person that's been, for example, convicted within the past 10 years of any violent or serious felony will have an issue. Any person that's been, the felony conviction have involved like fraud, deceit, or embezzlement potentially as well will. Any person under the age of 21. Those are some of the state requirements that who cannot be able as well. There's some doctors and other forms of individuals, potentially city officials, maybe even law to be actually owning these facilities. But that's from state requirements. I'm not sure if that was your question.
It wasn't. If I could, may I
I
just
can answer
clarify?
some of that question too for
Thank
you
you.
as well. Okay, well, first of all, it starts at the beginning because you need a physician's recommendation in order to go comply and get medical cannabis. And there are requirements on what the examination by the physician requires, what the physician must inform the patient, inform consent, how the physician must give alternative medications and document and follow up on the patient. Whether they're always followed or not, I can't tell you that. But the California Medical Association has been working on this. There's lots of physicians are very active in writing back and forth. And those that want legitimate cannabis use are very active in communicating with the California Medical Association, the AMA. There's been letters from JAMA, which is a very prestigious medical journal, going back and forth on what the requirements are. But definitely there are requirements for a physician on what he must do, what he must evaluate, he or she, let me be fair, okay? Evaluate and do before giving a recommendation for cannabis and how they should follow up on the patient. So at the beginning of the chain, before you can even get a recommendation, those requirements must be met.
And if your question is about who's regulating based on this measure, on what's happening, it would be city officials. Because it's a city ordinance, it's a city measure, should it pass, it is the city officials who will be regulating and maybe task force of who would be open and so on and so forth. Those are the city officials. Does that answer your question? Okay. Who regulates the quality and strength of the medical marijuana? I don't even know if that's part of the measure to regulate for this measure.
I mean, all cannabis will be required to be tested, and of course, like if you're talking about like synthetic cannabis, that is strictly prohibited. I'm not sure who asked that question, but that's strictly prohibited in the ordinance, and it's prohibited by state law. But in regards to the regulation, I mean, all all the regulation checks and balances in regards to, testing, making sure that we're reporting, quantifying is in there, but it's really just lab testing. We need to make sure that the tests, I don't know, but yeah,
So it would again be the city. So like the shops and the delivery, everyone would be independently testing with certified labs that the industry uses, but to make sure they're doing it, would be the city.
It's actually International Standards Organization is where the testing standards are right now in California law. Just like food handling cards, just like everything that we do. I mean, look, if somebody were to get sick eating a hamburger out of a fast food place, they could track that hamburger all the way back in France and say it was horse meat that you were getting, and we can pull all of that product all the way across the country off, whether it's salmonella in cantaloupe that come out of a specific farm back there. We have that ability to track, and standards on testing are ISO right now. Each state will determine which standards they're going to be using to determine and what will be tested in those standards, whether it's heavy metals. I mean, some states have put things in there that they're testing for that some other experts will say makes no sense at all. And then some purposely leave things out that should be tested. It is an opinion that when it goes federally, it will probably go to ANSI, which is a higher standard, which a lot of meat processing and the things that you consume right now. But it's called standards. That's who they're going to pick, how they're going to do it, and how they're going to measure it.
Do any of the panelists have a financial interest in the marijuana industry?
Yes.
I think it's only Adam on the panel that does. I think everybody else is. Am I correct?
I mean, yes, as a previously, legal operator, and hopefully to, help to be a legal operator in the future as if this passes and all the regulations come through. So answer your question is yes.
Okay. And will the growers and cultivators be taxed?
Yes.
Per the zoning aspects, where in reality do you see the majority of dispensaries to be located? Won't the shops concentrate in downtown Long Beach?
So, no, there will not be a concert in downtown Long Beach. Actually, the first time around when the city council was considering only industrial zones, that's when we were going to have an issue, particularly on the west side and the north side of Long Beach, where we're going to go ahead and funnel them only because that's where the majority of the industrial areas are. With this initiative, what we've done is we've focused on sensitive uses that are, like I said, schools, parks, beaches, and libraries. So that way, we're staying away from kids, youth, and so on. And because it is sensitive uses, it'll be as balanced as possible throughout the city. So that way, no one part of the city will have any more collectives or cultivation or whatever licenses than the other. So when it all comes down, it should be equally throughout the city.
Okay, this is a fun one. And by the way, I've been doing these in order of picking them up. Why is such a corrupt and fascist policy being proposed? This law is garbage. This just brings more drug dealers to market. Why does anyone with a brain support this? Anyone with a brain on the panel want to answer?
What was the question then?
I think I opened up with why I support it, and that it's because,
I think our questioner came in later than that, so if you want to repeat yourself, feel free.
well, you know what, I walked in the shoes of people. I had personal dealings with people, both my family members and friends, some of whom have had cancer. They couldn't eat, they couldn't sleep, and cannabis allowed them to do both. My sister was taking prescription meds, which at times are prescribed like candy, and unfortunately she became addicted to them and ended up overdosing. As a 29-year police officer, I saw a lot of overdoses of opiate drugs, central nervous system stimulants, etc. And so my hope of being involved in this is, Long Beach becomes kind of the foundation for what happens for the rest of the country. and that, our own federal government will start doing testing where we can really figure out what cannabis does to help people. Right now, all of the testing is done outside of our country, and I'm sure the doc has something he wants to say about that. So in dealing with cops, firefighters, military guys that I know have been exposed to post-traumatic stress syndrome, many of them have told me that this literally saved their life. They can actually sleep at night. And, until you've known these people personally and seen the pain that they've gone through and traveled that road of pain with them, you don't understand. So, God bless the person that asked this question. I hope you never have to go through what me and my family had to go through.
Just very simply stated, for some patients, certainly not all, but for some patients, cannabis medicine is the most effective medicine with the least side effects to treat their problem. Why should that be denied them if we have it? That makes no sense. Who is anybody to say that they're going to deny somebody the most effective treatment? Again, we have a worldwide market. Market's the wrong word. A worldwide petri dish, basically, where we have shown that cannabis is effective medicine. If you know anything about the science behind it, we actually make our own cannabinoids and have our own cannabis receptors in our body. The more we study about it, the more we find that many of the pharmaceuticals that are out there now are working through the endocannabinoid system, and we're going to find actually more medications in the future that work through the endocannabinoid receptors, which again, not to be too technical, but it would be foolhardy and ignorant, sorry for accusing that person, to think that there's not a role and place for cannabinoid medicines.
Question. I'm voting no on Proposition 64. If I vote no on 64, what will I put for MM? Is Prop 64 the same as MM? I only agree with legalizing medical marijuana. Prop 64 is for recreational use. Measure MM is for medicinal marijuana only. So if you vote no on Prop 64, you're voting no on statewide recreational use. If you vote yes on MM, you are voting for medicinal use in the city of Long Beach.
Just to kind of go off what you're saying. So recreational cannabis has never been approved in the state of California, ever before. Medicinal cannabis was approved by the voters in 1996, and then there's been upgrades along. And this ordinance, in essence, is a medicinal ordinance. There is no element in regards to the recreational or Prop 64 here. This is strictly a medicinal ordinance. And even if Prop 64 fails or passes, it has no bearing on the medicinal ordinance because in California we've already approved it. And we see numerous states up and down, cities up and down the state of California that have medicinal collectives. So this is strictly a medicinal ordinance, and there will be no bearing on whether Prop 64 passes or not. So MM to pass is about repealing the ban in Long Beach and bringing back safe access for patients, period, and it's got nothing to do with 64.
Thank you. We're about ready to wrap it up. Is there anyone that is dying to ask a last question? If not, then I'm sure that the panel will stick around for a little bit. I know that yes, did you have a quick one, or? Yes.
Stand up.
I'm hearing good things about the dispensary side, and I know there's some conversation about cultivation. Is the city supporting the manufacturing of the products that are being sold at the dispensary?
So you want to know how MM addresses cultivation?
No, I understand it's addressing cultivation. I just find it interesting, a lot of cities are sort of ignoring the fact that you've got to go from plant and then product. And, a lot of cities are not supporting that. They're looking at that as like, the neglected, component of the industry. And The
By
products don't
manufacturing, you need to
magically
buy
show.
products.
I'm sorry?
By manufacturing, you mean the other products that people are making out of.
There's many different
That's
medicinal
what
products.
you're asking.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a
So I'm
Okay, let's
just
see if we
curious
can get a,
how the city's addressing it.
okay, well, let's see if we can get.
Well,
Short answer.
in regards to the city is not addressing it. This Measure MM is addressing it. So, again, this measure allows for all state licenses, which includes the two different types of manufacturing. I know the volatile one, we're still waiting to see what the state's gonna end up doing on. And it also, transportation, cultivation, nursery, dispensary, special tenant, it has all the different licenses that the state allows for, except for outdoor cultivation. If you know the landscape in Long Beach, there isn't really that much space. But this measure does address manufacturing and it complies with state law. So it is in here, but in regards to the city, they've banned all and any
They
cannabis
don't,
activity.
it's nothing in Long Beach.
Just this measure.
Yeah. So, and just one last part, one last comment, you know, MA was put on by the city council. MN was put on by over 36,000 registered voters in the city of Long Beach who agree with the fact that patients should have their medicine. So I hope that you think, you're thoughtful and when you vote and that you really look at MN closely. And if you have any concerns or questions, I'm sure the panel can stay around for a few more minutes, but I want to thank you for taking the time to really learn more and be an educated.